I'm Jen. I'm the kinda old autistic lady. Have you ever wondered, either as an employer, a coworker, a family member, or a loved one, of an autistic person who works in a corporate environment, what the thinking process is behind how that person gets from point A to point B from a thinking process? If you're curious, I'm going to show you my thought process and what I have to do to get from point A to point B if I'm asked to do something. And I'm hoping that it will illustrate just why you may get a different result than what you're expecting if you're the employer, or you might get too much information if you're the employer. And if you are autistic or think you might be autistic and you're watching this, of course, I want to give the disclaimer, no two autistic people are alike, and everybody's got a little bit of a different profile. And as humans, we're all kind of unique anyway. So if you don't think the way I'm about to show, it just means that you're not me, essentially. But if you do think in a similar way, I'm hoping that hearing it articulated might be helpful. I'm going to share my screen in just a moment. And when I do so, we're going to start with a file on top of a file so that we can examine an email, a pretend email, line by line, and what's there, what was asked for versus how I got there. And then I'll show you what the version of the email looked like after I had it in a pretend scenario written out, but not necessarily polished, like polished. Just here's the thought process of what I had, what I did, what I thought I might need, and what I had to pare down. So we're going to pretend for our scenario that I am an employee that works in a corporate environment, which I do work in a corporate environment, but we're going to take something that's not my real job. Okay. So let's pretend that I am in some sort of product development or some sort of a sales position. And I've been given a task to come up with some information, and then I'm let loose to go do what I'm going to do. And I want to also pretend for our scenario that these were not written instructions. Written instructions can be a great accommodation. I want to illustrate, though, why written instructions are sometimes needed, as well as if you do write written instructions for somebody who is autistic, or work with them to write down instructions if they're part of the process, that you still might get something that you didn't think you were going to get because of a thinking pattern that at times can be quite different. So you're going to see my little picture. We're going to go through this, and without further ado, here is the little demonstration. Great. So here's the scenario. I am with another person who's giving me instructions, and we're going to say that they're verbal instructions. And so what this person actually says out loud, or puts in an email, or puts in an instant message, the words that are used to convey this task to me are get X, Y, and Z from, and then insert some sort of a name. We need to know the decision on what the animal print is to be on next year's children's pajamas. Okay, seems pretty simple. They're probably going to ask, do you have any questions about it? I'm going to say no, because on its face, it looks really simple. That seems really fine. Okay. But here's what they intended and didn't say, because a lot of the time instructions are implicit. Okay, so if I'm going to think this through just from an actual steps perspective, part of what they meant isn't communicated up front. So they want me to get certain information from the person and find out what they want to be on the next year's children's pajamas. But there's a middle step that's missing that is implied, and that I probably know is implied. I mean, I've been around for a long time. I let's say I know how this person operates who's giving me the instructions. And they want me to find out from the person that I'm reaching out to what they're going to need in order to provide X, Y, and Z. So we've really got two tasks. We've got, I need to find out X, Y, and Z, and it may or may not be related to the animal on the children's pajamas, but I've got X, Y, and Z that I need to get, and then I have the child's pajamas animal that I need to go ahead and gather. So I probably, if I get this task, I'm going to sit down and sort of gather my thoughts, and I'm going to go, okay, here's an implicit second step that I can think through and say, okay, person might not be able to give me X, Y, and Z if I just ask for it outright. So I'm going to have to think through what are they going to need in order to give that information to me. Okay, so before I show you the next step of things that I would normally think about before I ever approach the person that I need to get this information from, I have to give a disclaimer. My mind will never, under any circumstances, skip the steps I'm about to say. Okay, so there may be some people watching this who will say, wow, you're about to really overcomplicate things. Why can't you just get what the person is asking you for? Like literally just take those exact sentences and ask. My mind will never do it. Will never, ever do it. It will not do it. I have to go through this whole thought process before I ever approach the person with the questions, because all of these steps exist in my head. It won't take as long as it's going to take because I'm explaining everything right now that I'm about to put on the screen, but I am wired to think through these steps. It is my brain circuitry. It is how I am wired. There is no circumventing these steps. Okay. So what I will do in a situation like that is I will start to come up with some questions that I need to know in order to get to a place where I think I can approach the person that I need to get this information from. So we're going to start with contextually. And contextually and context are such important words when you're dealing with somebody who is going through a thought process similar than the one I go to. And even there are a lot of autistic people that even if their thought process is different from mine, context is so important. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Okay. So we're going to say that I've dealt with this person I have to get this information from before. Let's say they're in charge of a department that has made decisions about things or is in the process of making decisions about things. And we're going to define a little bit more closely what XYZ is so that it makes sense when I go through it. So we're going to say that XYZ is one product, but it's got 3 products packaged within it. We're going to say it's a children's jewelry set. And within that set, there's a necklace, a bracelet, and earrings. Okay. So 3 things, but 1 SKU. And in the background of things we've discussed about this particular XYZ thing, the person I'm going to approach, I know that there's been a whole bunch of things that have been up in the air in discussions for a long time that they had to get through to, some committee had to make decisions or whatever. And so they had to, pick maybe materials and suppliers and colors and patterns and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I have that as background knowledge and I know this person. So what I'm going to think about before I ever ask the person for XYZ is, do I know what that person's going to need? Or is this just a cold question? And I'm probably going to have an idea of what I think they need. But here's the thing, I'm not on that team. And I know they've talked about a lot of different things. And I don't want to come across like I don't know what I'm talking about. So I will usually go through this mental step to say, okay, if I'm not 100% sure what that person's going to need from me in order to give me X, Y, and Z, I'm going to think through previous conversations I've had with that other person to give me context clues about what I have to have in this conversation or this instant message, text message, email, whatever the communication is. If it's written communication, it's a lot easier for me because I can think through it, I can write it, I can think through it, I can read it, I can think through it. If it's a live conversation or a phone call, it's a lot more stressful, and I have to really front load what I'm thinking about because I feel like I have to be prepared for the person to ask me just about anything. And it could be something I've thought about. It could be something I haven't thought about, and I have to think on my feet. So I'm going to think through, what does this person need to know? If I don't know what they need to know, what have we discussed? What's been relevant in the past? And then what do I have to minimally convey so that I don't seem like I'm ill-informed about asking for X, Y, and Z, but then also striking a balance of, I also need to seem like I have had conversations about this before and then I'm not just completely clueless, okay? That is where my headspace goes. So now I'm going to show you what I actually would write in this scenario if I was going to write it in advance before I start paring everything back. If it were something that I was going to ask verbally, I would go through the same process. I might even write it out so that I can kind of practice it and think through it and refine it and practice it. At least go through the mental conversation at least once. So there's no skipping this next step, okay? So the next thing that happens is I write out the following. Where did I put it? Where did I put it? Oh, it's a separate file. I knew I did this for a reason. Okay. So this is what I would write out. And I know this is a lot of verbiage. I suppose I could try to hide some of it just so that there's not so much clutter. I think I'll do that. Okay. So I would write out, dear, whoever this person's name is, thanks for your last email, or, whatever conversation we've had in the past. I need to get some information from you. And again, remember, I'm thinking about X, Y, and Z. That's what I've been tasked with. But what I'm going to write out as a potential thing I need to say to this person is, because you told me A, B, and C, and I also know D, E, and F, please tell me X, Y, Z. Because again, I want to appear knowledgeable and not like I know too much, because I might also know elemental P, Q, R, S, T, U, V. So I'm leaving that out. I've made that decision to leave that out. That was a thought process I had to go through. But I am bringing other things into the question that the original person who asked me to get this information didn't bring up. Okay. So that's what I'm going to end up writing, at least as a first draft. Whether or not I say this or actually write it in the copy that goes to the other person is, I don't have enough information thought through yet to know, but I'm at least getting it out of my head and in a visual place where I can see it. And because I really think in terms of conditionals, and I tend to think with, I don't want to nerd out on English grammar. So if you think through phrases, if I said something like, I need X, Y, and Z because I know this other thing, how my mind will initially phrase that is, because I know this other thing, I need X, Y, and Z. It almost always will flip it to the clauses. The dependent clauses is the English part of grammar. And before I polish it, I'm going to have to turn it back into either two independent clauses or an independent and a dependent clause that are written in such a way that they don't need a comma. So that's what's initially going through my head. So that's why I'm writing here, hey, I need some information because you told me A, B, and C. So that's a previous conversation. And I also know D, E, and F to be true, which may or may not have been a conversation with this other person. I need to know X, Y, and Z. Okay. Again, if I were not going to write this in a way that had all these dependent clauses and conditionals and things, I would just say, please let me know X, Y, and Z. I know we talked about A, B, and C, and then, there's some background about D, E, and F, but I need X, Y, and Z. And in my first round of thinking through this, what I'm really looking at is I'm trying to open the conversation up so that if the other person needs to ask me some questions, they feel like I'm prepared to talk about A, B, and C, D, E, and F. But if they don't, then they can just tell me X, Y, and Z. Because I know that when they tell me X, Y, and Z, also, the person I'm giving the information to who originally asked me to do this may start asking me about A, B, and C, and D, E, and F. All of that is past conversations that might contextually come up that I want to be prepared for. I don't want to be caught flat-footed. And so I have gone through the step of thinking through it. Okay, so then I go into conditionals some more, and I'll go into this thing that says, okay, I need X, Y, and Z. Pretty sure I know X, don't need to talk about that. But if Y has this thing going on with it, whether it's a fact pattern or some other discussion point that has to happen, if X, if that's true, if Z is a certain way because of X, I need to know it. Like, hey, everything was going to look like it was beaded jewelry. You know, is the beaded jewelry thing still the case? If it's true, please let me know if all three are going to be beaded. Or if it's not true, if you went with like a metallic look, then tell me that too. So I almost always have these conditionals in my head. It's never just a straight give me X, Y, Z without a lot of other conversation and thinking. If it's just this is where my brain's going. And then I will say something like this. Okay, after we spoke the last time or yesterday, whatever it is, I gave some thought to what we need to discuss today. And I know that you said to gather information 1, 2, 3. I did that, but I also gathered information 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. With that in mind, what about LMNOP? And then I will explain. I'll say, well, I thought 4, 5, 6 might mean you wanted me to do steps I, Roman numerals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Is my understanding correct? If not, please explain. Did you mean 5 or 6? Something else? Okay, so just this little bit here before we even approach this next paragraph. If you're looking at that and you're thinking, wait, stop. Why are you bringing all this into it? This was not part of the original task you gave me, that the person gave me. You're way overcomplicating things. I'm not. I promise I'm not. I'm wired to think this way so that if any of these other things are up in the air, I'm prepared to talk about them when I'm asked about them later because they're details that I need. And if you've seen my video about how details come to me through a Pez dispenser rather than like I'm just opening the box and seeing everything, this is why. Because I don't know all the Pez dispenser pieces and what order they're going to come out and what context they're going to come out. And so I'm trying to lay it all on the table so that if really truly this person knows X, Y, and Z, they can give it to me. But I want to let them know that I'm also thinking of all these details. This is my first pass at thinking through this. I'm probably not going to say all this to the person, but it's what my brain has to go through to examine what the Pez dispenser has spit out at me and determine if I have to keep hitting the Pez dispenser up for more and more and more Pez. Okay. After I've thought through all these questions and I've probably written them down, then I jump to the whole thing about what animal have they decided on for the pajama prints, because it's a separate question. And I'm probably in my first pass going to think about it like this and say, okay, the last time we spoke, you talked about elephant. I wasn't sure if that was the decision, if that's what you meant. Thought you might mean elephant. But just in case you also meant cheetah, because we've talked about that too, I've prepared some information about both cheetah and elephant for your review, even though that I was never asked for this. If there was even the slightest bit of context from the past that leaves this unclear in my mind, when I'm thinking through it, I'm going to bring up cheetah as well as elephant so that I can think through and remember and go through my notes so that I can remember, was it cheetah or was it not cheetah? Was it elephant? Was it not elephant? Was it completely clear? Was it not completely clear? Were there still things up in the air? And if so, are they things that I think we're going to have to talk about before I jump to, is it elephant, if it really was cheetah? Okay. because I can't remember all that at once. I mean, I might have been a little bit better at it when I was younger, but y'all, I'm middle-aged. And because I'm so highly tuned to a jillion details all the time, my brain files the details in places that I can't always get at them. So I take extensive notes, and I'm going back in my memory through what was said. And I may or may not have somebody else's notes that they took in a meeting. I live in a world where I don't like relying on AI for notes, because when AI summarizes things, it tends to leave out a lot of the details that I want. And if you're going with true transcription, then if you're dealing with a business, there may be some sort of like confidentiality thing that we don't want the public to know what product we're going to go with or whatever. And so I get really conservative, and I'm like, I don't want to put it in an AI because I don't want it to be used to train other data, and that whole thing. So I'm going to go through this process of basically saying I've prepared both for your review, because I'm deathly afraid of ever seeming like I'm not prepared on something, because I'm always over preparing. That's something that I think is a little underappreciated about people who are capable of working full-time jobs in corporate who are also autistic. And that is, if any kind of extra steps are going on in our brains, we're highly aware that whoever we're getting information from or having a discussion with probably doesn't even need all these details, but we have to process them. And if they might need them, even if it's just a little bit of a sliver of a chance, we don't want to be in the situation of looking like we don't know the answer to any number of these other things. Because if in the moment we have to have a conversation on the fly that we haven't practiced, it can be problematic and then turn into a whole bunch of other meetings, or might turn into a conversation, that happens that I'm not a part of, saying, hey, Jen wasn't prepared for this, or why on earth was she coming to me with this without also mentioning this other thing? It's never just one thing. Okay. At least with me, it's not. Okay. So then I bring up Cheetah, and then I'll probably also, depending on what time of the day it is, when I'm thinking through this, if it's same day and it's getting kind of late in the day because I've had other things, or I've been thinking about this for too long, I'm probably going to write out, just to get it out of my system. Probably never going to say it to the person, but just to get it out of my system, I'm probably going to write out, I didn't want to contact you. It's the last 15 minutes of when I know you're working. I know you're busy, so I went ahead and prepared both so that I can, ask you both the next day. And even if you only meant elephant, I'm really glad I researched Cheetah, because I don't want it to seem like they're paying me to do stuff that I never did, that they didn't want, that's going to cost them money or whatever. So I'm going to usually bring up, at least in my mind as I'm going through it, some positive thing about why I did Cheetah. Like, oh, hey, I learned about this, maybe it comes back up in discussion for next season, or, there were A/B testing, and, I knew they were a tie or something. So I've looked up both. I know the research shows we might like the cheetah ones. We might like lion ones. We might like elephant ones, whatever it is. I go through all these steps and I write all of this out. Or if it's a conversation and I don't have a lot of time, I may think through it and jot notes down. But before I ever go to write the thing for the person I need to have communication with, one of the things I want to illustrate by this is I'm able to articulate this. A lot of people can't. I don't care if you're autistic, allistic, neurodivergent, neurotypical. There's a whole lot of people in this world that cannot articulate how they think through things. I just happen to be wired to be one of the people that can think through it, analyze it, and then have a way that I can explain it to people who are not inside my head. And that last step is something that, as a general thing, if you ask somebody what they were thinking when they did something, you're probably going to freak them out, because the whole question, why were you thinking that? Or what were you thinking? Or walk me through your thinking, can seem threatening. And lots of times people won't know to articulate it. Like they'll be in the moment, they'll think through it, but they won't have it in ordered steps like that. Or they were in hyperfocus and they got through the thinking they needed to do so they could get the task done, but they weren't thinking about thinking. They weren't doing that metacognition. I'm wired to constantly do metacognition. So that's another reason why I'm doing the videos, because I am wired for that. Therefore, I want to use it as an opportunity, because my channel is all about my experience with adult autism that I'm hoping can be helpful for somebody else. I want to go through this. Now, once I go through this, before I ever contact the person about asking the two things about XYZ and what animal's supposed to be on the pajamas, I also know, because I've lived in this world for enough decades that I know myself well enough, and I've worked in a corporate environment for long enough to know that if I ask the other person all of this stuff, I'm going to look like I have no idea what I'm doing, and I haven't been paying attention in other meetings that I've had, and I have lost context on other things because maybe decisions were made that I didn't pick up on, or a conversation happened since then that I wasn't a part of, but that I maybe should have known about and gotten notes from somebody, whatever, okay? I know that if I come out with this much in an email or a Teams message or a text message or a phone call or whatever, that it's going to be a disaster, okay? It's just been my past experience. But if you're in a corporate relationship with somebody and they are not 45 years old, maybe it's their first job, or maybe they've changed industries and they used to do something that wasn't corporate before, like I used to be a teacher. Maybe that person you don't have the kind of relationship with that person yet. Maybe they're new to the company and you're not going to like grill them with what they were thinking through. But if they have, neurodivergent thinking differences, they probably are in their own person-specific version of wondering what on earth was meant by the instructions that were given, and what are all of the contextual things that may or may not be safe to ask. So like, as an example, the person that asks me, get X, Y, and Z and find out the animal. If I'm a brand new person and I'm thinking through all of this stuff, I may not know in the moment that I'm even going to think about all this stuff, because people have different processing times. If the instructions were given verbally, people who have auditory processing delays might need to sit with this for an hour and think about it. Or sometimes for me, I might have to think over it over a night if it's not an immediate need, so that I can look at everything I've written here and then go, okay, what am I going to pare out? It's also why I have sleeping problems, because my mind doesn't shut this stuff off. So if you have somebody that you don't have a good relationship with yet, or they don't think you're totally safe to share that they overthink all these things, they might try to over-explain it. When asking for instructions, they might want all of these instructions. They might absolutely not want all these instructions, but want to know you're a safe person, that if they do need to bring up one or two of these things that they've thought through, that you're an open enough person to bring that up before they go to this other person and try to find out XYZ in the animal. Any number of combinations. So all of that is to say that with the amount of time I've spent in a corporate environment and professionally communicating in things like education, and I worked in contact centers, I've done quality coaching, I've done quality assessments, all of these things that I think through, which is why I think through metacognition. All of that is to say that what I would eventually, I can't get this down. What I would eventually end up writing in an email to the person I need to address, or in an instant message, or perhaps have written out that I would have as a talking point to discuss on a phone call, is not all that stuff I just brought up. It's going to be much simpler. It's going to be, dear so-and-so, thanks for the last communication we had. After our last discussion, please let me know the decision about X, Y, and Z. And if am I thinking Y is the correct fact pattern? And then I'm just going to say, please explain. I'm not going to ask, well, what about Z and if this and then that and because of this, because I know that other person probably doesn't have time to think through things like that and to answer all these million questions and to wonder why I'm, asking all this stuff from these other meetings. I have to get to a point where I say, you know what? Am I going to ask open-ended questions? Am I going to ask closed-ended questions? And in this case, rather than going through what you saw on this whole thing about why is the fact pattern, is Z, true, provide more info, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and elemental P, all this 1, 2, 3, 4 Roman numerals. These are all things that after I think through them, I'm probably going to say are not important or would be confusing or would be like, hey, this person I need to ask this information from is a really important person and they don't have time to have an hour-long conversation when they can just tell me XYZ and an animal. Okay. So you have to know your audience. And that's a whole nother set of thinking steps that I'm not going to talk about on this particular video, but I might at some point. So I'm just going to ask, is why the correct fact pattern, like from whatever the last conversation we had, if I still had that question, because I don't want to have a second communication if they're already talking about why and giving me the answer up here. And if it's not, just ask them to explain. Make it an open-ended question rather than all those closed-ended questions I had in the raw thing I wrote. And if I have produced additional information that I was not asked for by either the person who requested I take these steps or the person that I'm asking this information from, but I have a prior relationship with them, and there's any kind of additional context that would make it make sense to somebody who's paying me to do these things, maybe by the hour, maybe salaried, depending on whatever the corporate situation is, I might also attach something else to the email. And as long as contextually I think they're going to get why I attached it, I'm just going to say something like this. If I don't think they're going to understand it with me saying a simple thing like this that's not related to X, Y, and Z and a direct correlation to it. I mean, when we're talking about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all this stuff down here, this is not direct relation. This is, let me go down a couple of rabbit holes and look at different patterns of how information could fit together and what's needed to fit here and what's needed to fit there. And it might be related, but it might be 15 steps removed. Okay. If it is, then I'll leave it out. If after thinking through that whole process and thinking through conversations or other meetings or other written correspondence I've had, if I do think it will be understood and I want to save an additional communication with this person, I will attach it and I will trust that they understand it. So in this context, they've requested it. Did they request it at the same time as this other stuff? Maybe, maybe not. I have to lean back on that relationship with the other person, which is part of why it's difficult as an autistic person to do corporate jobs sometimes and why it tires us out, because then there's the relational piece on top of this. And that's the part that I know myself personally with autism being a social disability, that I have to stop and think, is my understanding of the relationship I have with this person likely the same as what they think my relationship is with them? And if I'm not sure, that I'm in this gray area of I can't really ask that as a direct question without it seeming really out of place. So I have to do some guesswork. And guess what? When I do guesswork, I'm going to get really tired thinking about it because it's an unknown and it's not a straightforward thing. It's not XYZ. It's, we've had these past 25 conversations. What does that mean for how much trust that person has in me, how much trust I have in them? With a hierarchical difference, how much information should I be bringing to them? Should I be bringing it to somebody else on the team that reports to them or an administrative assistant? Should I be, only asking this on Fridays because I know that Monday through Thursday, this person is generally at a client? All these kinds of different things that could apply. Those questions never stop. It's constant data and constant patterns and constant rearranging of things to make sure I've got the right configuration for whatever task I need to do. So I'm not a person that typically will ask for written directions on a task like this. But if you are asked for instructions by somebody, it could be something similar to what I'm describing. It could be something completely unrelated to the thought process that I have. Their autism and their traits and how their brain works might be a totally different profile of autism, where it's more auditory processing issues. It's more antiphasia, where they can't picture things in their head, and so they need it written out. It might be memory problems due to any number of other co-occurring health conditions that they need it written out because they're afraid they're going to forget. There's a jillion reasons why somebody could want this written out. Accommodation official or not accommodation official with the disability. So if somebody ever asks you to write it out, it's so much better to just do it and not question them. I feel like people have their own needs, and if they voice their needs, they're doing it for a reason, and they're trying to convey trust that you're going to trust them, that they know their needs. Okay. I'm off my pulpit here. And then the last thing is, if there's anything I needed to prepare about this whole conversation about elephant from any kind of context I had with them prior, I will normally say I've prepared whatever the deliverable is on elephant, or what I think might be helpful about elephant if the decision hasn't been made about the animal yet. If I've assessed that the relationship is such that it's appropriate to put in this email, I may bring it up. And then I'll just ask another open-ended question. Is there anything else for this phase that's required? And then it puts the ball in the other person's court. So the last talking point I want to say about why I'm doing this extremely long video is this last sentence is sometimes why, if somebody does disclose that they are neurodivergent and the response comes back to say, well, you don't look autistic. You don't seem like you have, issues with X, Y, or Z, or, executive dysfunction, or you don't seem like you have that. For people like myself who do function in a full-time environment for an employer at the corporate level, which is not everybody's jam, either because you might not like it, or it might not be how you're wired. And it might not be where your abilities are. You might be artistic and be doing something that's, whatever it is. We all have our different gifts and special interests. But what I feel like happens a lot of the time with myself is, if I get people second guessing when I say, hey, just want to let you know I'm autistic. So if I ever come to you with a communication and I ask you something that seems like it's really out in left field to you, it will do me a huge favor for you to be direct with me and just say, I don't understand why you're asking me that. Can you please explain it? Or if I'm bringing something up that isn't related and you don't have time to have that kind of a conversation with me, be direct with me and say, what you're asking me about isn't germane to what we need to do right now. Can we focus on these other things that are germane? And then that gives me direction, and it is very black and white, and I don't have to spend part of my energy in that conversation worrying about all this other stuff that I feel like I might need to discuss in a meeting or in a conversation or in an email, whatever. But because neurodiversity is very much an internal experience, especially for people, I'm classed as somebody who has low support needs. I will say, though, that people don't see what they don't see. So the amount of energy a whole day of this kind of thing takes up for me also means that there are really simple things that I need to ask help with in my personal life, because I just don't have the energy to do it. I just don't. And it could be something as simple as, there's a bill sitting on the counter. I might just say to my husband, hey, I know that bill's got my name on it. Will you just open it up and tell me if it's something I have to think about? And if it's not, will you just get rid of it? And we've been married for a long time, and he knows that I'm asking that because it's a need I have, and I'm voicing it, and it's not a big deal for him to do. So he just does it, and it's not a big deal. But if you're in a new relationship with somebody who is in that place of exhaustion or near burnout or actual burnout, because this whole mental process doesn't stop until burnout happens. And then it becomes doom scrolling and Netflix and chill and all the other stuff that happens with burnout. Questioning, why can't you just get up and look through the envelope that's on the table? Sometimes that little thing can feel so heavy. Like, I can't get up out of this chair, and I feel like you should know that. But maybe they don't. Maybe you're in a new relationship with them, or maybe they had their own crazy kind of day where they're also kind of in that place, right? So to wrap up, if you are a person who works with neurodivergent people, either who have made that clear or who you suspect may be, my biggest piece of advice, besides being explicit, giving written instructions if they're requested, are two things. Let people communicate in the way that they feel is going to be most effective, because there are times when I'm prepared to go into a situation to have a verbal conversation where anything could come up in the conversation, and there are definitely times when I don't have the energy to do it. And I would much rather just go through this whole written process or this whole thought process where I'm at least thinking through each of these things, and then just stick a couple of sentences into an instant message or an email or whatever. Have the trust with your person that you work with that they understand what they have the capacity for right at that time. And they also have to navigate what the relationship with the other person is that they need the information from, or that they need to have a meeting with, or that they need to have this email exchange with. They know that they might be in a place with the other person that they're still in their own trust building. And so maybe it does need to be a phone call, or maybe part of their accommodations are, you know what, for things that aren't life and death, let's just have a written conversation. People know what they need by the time they get to a place where they ask for them. So that's my last point. Please, if you are on a team where you are having any kind of questions or comments about anything in this video, this is definitely one where if you have additional questions or additional topics that you've thought about by listening to this one, I'd really like to know them, because I'm more than happy to make more videos on the whole corporate functioning with a late autism diagnosis conversation, as it relates to how I deal with things. And I'm only one person, but I'm more than happy to make that content. If there's not much of an interest in it, I don't want to bore people to death if what they're really looking for is something that could be done in a much shorter video, because this for me cannot be. It is something that I do need to break down, think through, discuss, give details, give rationale, because I feel like I wouldn't be doing due diligence if I made a video and only gave partial information that confuses people or makes someone think that they fully understand something that I left pieces out of that could then negatively impact somebody if they go to action something based off of the video that they've seen. So if you stuck with me through all this whole time, I really appreciate it. As always, thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day and take care.